Our guest in this first segment is Leslie Dach. He is the chair of Protect Our Care. They recently launched a multi-million-dollar hands-off Medicaid campaign. The goal is to block the Republican-led plan to slash Medicaid funding in order to pay for tax cuts for wealthy and big corporations. According to the release I have in front of me, Leslie, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you all.
Wonderful to have you on our show. Where are you physically located this morning, sir?
I am sitting in Washington, D.C.
Well, that's quite a place these days.
It's busy here.
It has been. It's tough to keep up with the news.
Yeah, there's some news if you haven't noticed.
Yes. What is the direct threat to Medicaid funding as of this Monday morning, February the 24th, Leslie?
Yeah, if I just to mention, kind of some of the numbers as an indication of why it's particularly important to West Virginia. Medicaid is the source of health coverage and insurance for 72 million Americans. And in West Virginia, it's 625,000 residents are covered by Medicaid and rely on it for their health care. And that is 45% of West Virginia children get their health care through Medicaid. That includes almost every foster child, for example. Medicaid pays for 46% of births in West Virginia and 77% of nursing home residents. And that is 49,000 seniors, 196,000 children, and 86,000 people with disabilities. So these are hardworking people who need some help in their health care. So that's what's at stake. What's going on is that in the conversations in Washington, in the House and in the Senate about the budget for next year, they are looking to cut at minimum of $880 billion from Medicaid, and some are promising $2 trillion cuts. And that's what we're trying to help stop because we think that is not the right way to treat the people of West Virginia or others in America who depend on Medicaid for their health care.
What is the current Medicaid budget?
It is a little bit, it's sort of in a sense that $880 billion a year, so it is an expensive, covers many people. The costs are shared between the federal government and the states.
So the budget is $880 billion? Is that what you said?
That's correct, and that's also the cut they want to make.
So if they cut $800 billion, they would wipe out the program
over
in
10 years.
I see. So about 10% a year every year for 10 years is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Is that correct? Okay. And
you also mentioned $2 trillion. How can you cut $2 trillion with an $880
over
billion?
10 years?
Over 10 years.
So $200 billion a year for 10 years. Okay. All right. And the effects of those cuts, let's say you trim 10% from the Medicaid budget, what are we looking at if that happens, Leslie?
Well, I think a lot of the people I mentioned will just simply lose their health care. There's only two ways to save money, really. One is you kick people off the rolls, you make it harder to get help, or you reduce the amount of services people have. So you take pieces of their health care away. So maybe no longer they can get cancer screenings. Maybe no longer it'll cover people who have issues and need mental health issues or addiction issues. So and really a lot of this is going to come down to the governors of each state. They'll be getting less money, and they'll have to make these hard choices about where to save it.
So it'll be more on the states to provide the care if funding is cut?
It will be. That's the only last resource. And I think, as we all know, state governments aren't allowed to live in deficits. They have to balance their budgets every year. It's not simply possible for them to find the dollars they would need to make it up.
Now, President Trump and Elon Musk insist that there is easily 10% of waste, fraud, and abuse in every department. Is it possible that you could find the equivalent of these cuts by eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, and therefore not making any real cuts to the system, just getting rid of the stuff that is waste or fraudulent?
I think most experts would agree that that's not possible. But even more important, kind of or equally important in this is, if you wanted to focus on waste, fraud, and abuse, you would write a law that basically says, let's hire more investigators at the federal level. Let's hire more judges to take these cases. Let's hire more people to chase down this fraud and abuse. They're not doing any of that. And in the studies that have been done on Medicaid, really there's not a question of individual people being on the program who don't deserve to be on. That's never been seen as a real issue.
Bill?
Yeah, these are frightening numbers. And I cannot believe the executive branch or Congress are not aware of the impact. And I also cannot believe that they're going to throw, in West Virginia, 675 people off some sort of medical insurance or medical aid.
625,000, Bill.
Okay, okay, a large number regardless. How serious do you think this is, Mr. Bach?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's an incredibly serious threat. I mean, they're about to vote this week on, a budget resolution, which basically is like the law and says that at a minimum, the Congress has to cut $880 billion from Medicaid. So this is an official act of the Congress, and it will mean these changes in a lot of parts of America and certainly in West Virginia.
You've raised another point that concerns me a great deal. You mentioned the appropriation of Congress. There is another factor now that's raising its ugly head, and that is the head of OMB believes in impoundment. So even if Congress does appropriate the money, does not mean the money is actually going to go to the agency. So there's two dilemmas that we as a country are facing just now.
That's exactly right. I mean, they are arbitrarily making decisions to close down programs, throw people out of their jobs, many of whom, have worked tirelessly to make, West Virginia or the America a better place, and now they're, with very little notice, basically being thrown on the streets from their job. And there's no thoughtfulness going on here. And I think we all know that healthcare is one of the most important things in all of our lives. And when it really is America's kitchen table issue, because as we all know in our own families, if somebody gets sick, it takes over the conversation at the kitchen table. And of course, it is truly a matter of life and death. And to do this in an arbitrary way and just take healthcare away from people without any thought, without any plan, is not the right thing to do. And interestingly, they're in a sense and they're doing this in order to create a $4 to $5 trillion tax cut, for the richest among us and big corporations. And so, one way to solve this whole problem is to just, give a smaller tax cut to the rich people. And then keep the money going to help people stay healthy and stay alive.
Maria.
So, Mr. Dach, talk a little bit about the buzzwords these days are waste, fraud, and abuse. In this particular system in Medicaid, where do folks think that is? People who don't belong on Medicaid rolls using the system, people who have other means of getting other types of health care? Do you have any sense of where the waste, fraud, and abuse is that folks are talking about in this particular case?
program. Well, first, I don't think the number is accurate. We don't really have an accurate number that would, I think most people would not say it's nearly that large. But the studies that have been done on this clearly show that it is not about individuals that are sneaking on and don't meet the criteria. It is about, frankly, rogue doctors or who are charging too much for their services, who are billing Medicaid for for services they don't perform, or using the wrong codes when they fill out the form for reimbursement. So it is at that level. It's not at the level of individual people cheating to get the benefits.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've started a pushback, hands-off Medicaid. Besides shows such as this, what is going to be your avenue of getting the word out, the concern out to the populace as a whole?
Well, obviously, I thank you for having me on the air today, because that's part of it. So, because there's so much news going on, people have busy lives, so it's important that they understand what's at stake. I think when they understand what's at stake, they'll have an opinion. We've already seen that in town hall meetings around the country, and we need people to simply let their members of Congress know that this is unacceptable to them. And I think the other myth here is this may be a partisan issue, and it is not. There's been a lot of polling done on this, looking at Trump voters and Republicans, and it's very clear that this is people are bipartisanly upset about this. So only 14% of Republicans want the government to spend less on health care. 67% of Trump voters have a positive opinion of Medicaid. And almost 40% of Trump voters say that they or someone in their immediate family relies on Medicaid for their health care. So, in a sense, the members of Congress are betraying their own voters, because Trump voters are very clear that they think that Medicaid is an incredibly important program.
Let me go back to a point that you made much earlier about waste, fraud, and abuse. Your comment was, instead of just killing the program, to go in and find out where the waste, fraud, and abuse exists. And you said by hiring more inspectors. That's exactly what should be done. Instead of firing the Inspector General, the IG, which I think do a very, very good job of recognizing and ferreting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Instead of firing them, they should be hiring additional IGs to look at this particular problem.
I mean, that's how, you hire more cops when there's more crime, and you don't tell people to sort of stay at home because it's too dangerous to go out. Yeah. And so there are proven tools for this, but I think the fact that they are not proposing anything in the budget, that would actually address the root causes, shows you what this is really about. It's a combined effort just to slice money, but also because I think people disrespect, the people in West Virginia who worked hard, can't afford multiple years of being in a nursing home, and paid their taxes and deserve to have the government step in and help them. Or else, imagine the burden on, literally, people are going to get kicked out of nursing homes because they can't pay the bill. And then they'll go home and they won't be able to get the home health care that Medicaid provides for. And their children are going to have to take care of them and quit work. So it's a cascading array of very emotional and very meaningful issues for families. This is not some thing on the side. They're losing their cable TV coverage. This is really about very draconian things. I mean, you're talking almost half of the births, nearly every foster child. So this is, the ramifications are severe and and onerous for people.
We're talking with Leslie Dach. He is the chair of Protect Our Care, and this group is trying to stop proposed Medicaid funding cuts in the next budget that could amount to as much as $880 billion to $2 trillion over the next 10 years. I think Leslie pointed out to us that the Medicaid annual budget is about $880 billion. So an $880 billion cut over 10 years would be basically 10% a year. $2 trillion would be right around 25% per year. So if these cuts go through, are we talking about essentially lowering the reimbursement rate for those who accept Medicaid, Leslie, or are we talking about scaling back what types of things will be covered by Medicaid? Any idea?
Well, I think, history tells us that this will be done by either kicking people off the rolls completely. Governors simply won't be able to, and the people who run the program in Washington will just either kick people off the rolls, or they will reduce the amount of money available for care. And then they will have to figure out what gets cut. So maybe it's health, maybe it's mental health, maybe it's cancer screenings, maybe, and they will go down and just wipe out some of this. The other thing is that our rural hospitals, particularly, which is of course true in West Virginia, but in every country, every state in the union, they're struggling to stay in, to be able to keep afloat and stay open. And they rely on Medicaid for a lot of their income, and they are struggling. And so we're going to see more rural hospitals close, or individual people who, if they have an emergency, you're going to have to drive, hours to get to a hospital. So this has ramifications on the system as well. They'll just have to make hard choices. And as we know, a lot of our hospitals are barely holding on.
Leslie, I'm sure you and your group have your fingers on the pulse of what Congress may or may not be doing. What is your sense? Will they pass this draconian cut to Medicaid?
Well, I think they will, unless they hear from the people who voted for them that it is not something they want to happen. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of independence from Republican members of Congress, and I'm trying to not be partisan here. It's just that it happens to be the truth here that, no Democrat, I think, in Congress is going to vote for these cuts. So what we really need, frankly, is just a handful of Republicans to stand up and say, look, I'm not going to vote for this bill if it has these draconian cuts, because they have a very thin margin. So, and some of them are getting nervous because you look at these staggering impacts that it would have on their constituents who vote for them. In a lot of these races, or congressional districts with close races, there might be 200,000 people on Medicaid, and that is a multiple of the margin that they had when they won their election. So they need to pay attention. And the thing that often happens is Americans don't, because they have busy lives, they don't realize the consequences of government actions till it's put into law. And so really these members of Congress, the ones that are paying attention, realize that this could cost them the election. But it is very hard for them to show the gut, to have the guts to stand up and take an independent stance.
Counting noses, counting votes very quickly. On the Senate side, does this fall under reconciliation, which requires only 50 votes, or does it require a full 60 votes on the part of the Senate?
No, it requires just 50 votes, just a majority. So that's another part of the danger. And frankly, I think Shelley Moore Capito has been. Has expressed concern about this. Now it's up to a lot of these conversations are going to happen between closed doors. To get it to work, what you need to do is to have the authors of the bill just take out this Medicaid piece. It's not going to be a separate vote on the floor in a way. I think if we all remember, all the work that Joe Manchin put in to try and change parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, that's the way this is going to play out. It's going to take members to go to the leadership and say, I'm not going to vote for this if it does this thing. Because in the end, Republicans will likely, vote for the overall package as opposed to voting no on the overall package. So what they need to do is get the bad stuff out of there. And they have a huge leverage. The leverage is particularly bigger in the House, because the margin's so small. But they have to stand up and just basically say, no cuts to Medicaid. And then they can find the money somewhere else, or they can, instead of having a $5 trillion tax break, they can have one that's $880 billion less.
So, Mr. Dach, are you proposing then no cuts to Medicaid, or would there be a less draconian, using Bill's word, methodology in which to do this, or are you just saying all or nothing? Not all.
I have 1 minute left.
1 minute.
Yeah, well, we're trying to protect it all because we think what we're talking about, they're talking about using the money to give this massive tax break. And our view is that it's better to put that money into the health care of hardworking people who need it the most and who are going to really suffer than it is to have a tax break that large. They can still have a massive tax break if that's what their policy is for the richest and the big corporations. They don't have to do it on the backs of people who work every day for a living.
Leslie Dach, thank you so much for your time this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Have a good day, sir.